Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about my March wrap up. March flew by. I feel like the beginning of March was it felt normal, and then out of nowhere I just blinked and it was over. So there's that. But March also is the end of the first quarter of the year. So because I'm updating you guys on what I read in March, I figured I would also update you guys on like a quarter one check-in, I guess, for my reading goals for this year. I only have 3, so I didn't think it was necessary to do a separate video altogether because, again, it's only 3 goals and my updates are fairly quick on that. So let's get started. I did read 5 books this month. 2 of them were novellas, and then the other 3 were regular books, I guess. So the first book was I don't film for a week and then I forget how to talk. Okay, let's try this again. The first book was a carryover from February into March, and that was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. In this, we are following the 2 main characters from the first book, and all of the supporting characters are in this book, and she added new characters into this book. We are following this world where there's a war and it's being kind of torn apart. And like any war, there are different sides and each are fighting and, believe in different things. And then we also get to know more about the gods. It is a fantasy world, so the war is being fought by the people, but it's because of the 2 opposing gods. We follow the 2 main characters and, again, the supporting characters through the entire book. And I ended up giving this also a 5-star. I fell in love with this world, with the characters. I really, really enjoyed the world building, like the character growth and like the character development in the first book and this one was just, it's just so good. I really enjoyed it. It does touch on some heavy topics, but overall, I think it's very reminiscent of real life and real struggles that we have. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful, like I just mentioned, it was a beautiful conclusion to the plots that it had. There is romance in this book, but do not be fooled. It is high stakes. Like I said, it's in the middle of a war, and it's just high stakes. And I really enjoyed it because I think that the characters made sacrifices out of love, and I just really enjoyed it. This does not, from what I remember, does not have spicy scenes. I could have skipped over them too. I don't fully remember, but anyways, that isn't part of the plots. I loved it. I highly recommend if you're looking for just a good book where it's going to be a little bit intense and you're going to be in your feelings. The Letters of Enchantment, this is the second book. The first one is Divine Rivals, and then Ruthless Vows is the second book. And then that completes pretty much that series. So, again, highly recommend. It is a YA. I don't know if that, if it's a good book, I'll read it. If it's YA or not YA, I'll still read it because it's a good book. So, Ruthless Vows is the first one. Let me put this over here. I also have a coffee, so cheers. Okay. The second book that I read in the month of March was Cujo by Stephen King. This book was definitely a choice to read after the Letters of Enchantment series. I was reminded again why I love Stephen King and how humanity scares me. Yeah. This I ended up giving a 4 stars. It was not one of my new all-time favorite Stephen King books, but still 4 stars. It was good. It is I think it's like more of like a horror / thriller. It is dark, tense, and medium pace. Well, at least for me. Okay, side tangent. If I talk about pace, it is really only relative to me because, again, everybody is different, and yeah, so it was medium pace for me. Ruthless Vows was just a faster read, I think, because I was just already involved and like into that world. So I just wanted to finish it up and see where things ended. Cujo was a much medium pace for me, but I think that's because it was a lot more emotional and it involved a dog. So I am one of the people that do not watch movies if the animal dies tragically. I feel like if an animal dies because of old age and it's like a good movie, like I'll probably end up watching it. But if it's like, I don't know, like an old movie and they ride horses into the battlefield, I'm not watching that movie because, well, I might, but I might just skip over the parts where the animals die because I will be in tears. This book also kind of, it took me a little bit, and I think that's kind of why it took me a little bit longer to read. It's not because it's a bad book, but there are no chapters in this book. It's just consecutively a story. Typically, Stephen King will have like parts in his books, and then within those parts, there'll just be numbers. It's like 1, 2, 3, like that. That's just typically what his books are. This book has no chapters, no parts, just consecutively reading. So that took me a bit to get used to because I am one of those people that read until the next chapter and then I'm like, oh, it's time for bed. Let me just finish this chapter and we're good to go. This book did not have that, so it did take me a little bit to get used to that. This book also had different points of view, different perspective or points of views, POVs. It had different points of views, and one of them was the dog. So it was so heartbreaking reading this book because you got the point of view of the dog when things were happening, and he wasn't necessarily, you as a reader understood what was happening pretty early in the book, but the dog didn't understand, and I think that's what made it so heartbreaking and so hard to read his perspectives, was because you just wanted to hug him and cuddle him, and you know, I have 2 dogs. It's hard. But this overall, all around, was a sad book. It just kind of went to show how like bad decisions of like people who have pets can lead to like bad things happening, I guess. And yeah, the way that all these worlds, because you know, it follows different families, and the way that they all end up connecting was kind of like, you know, it's Stephen King, like he always ends up connecting. Eventually his storylines meet, and then it's like the big event type of thing. So this was no different, but I think all the families that we follow, or all the points of view, POVs that we follow, they're all going through really hard things in life. So I would look up, I guess, some trigger warnings if you are very sensitive to certain ones, just to make sure it's not in here. And if it is, this is a heavy life book. And yeah, it's just, I still think about this book because yeah, it's just sad. This is a sad book. It's a good book, but it's a sad book. And I did read this now because his new book, which is, I think, novellas. It's like a book with novellas, and one of them is gonna somehow be related to Cujo. So I wanted to read this before that one came out, and I think that one's coming out in May. So I'll be ready. Yeah, Cujo. Look up trigger warnings for this. And then the next book, I did like a total flip and ended up reading The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. This book, I think the more, like while I was reading it, it took me a little bit to get into it. I have a whole reading vlog for this book, and I'll probably link it in the description box if you want to watch it. But this book, while I was reading it, it took me a little bit to get into it. I think part is because of Cujo, because it was just heavy topics in that book. And then this one was more of just a mischievous. This was more of a mischievous kid, you know, that you're following. Tom Sawyer and his friends. And yeah, I think now looking back at it, it was a very enjoyable experience. I think it's also because while I was reading this book, some very much life things happened to me medically, and it was in the middle of reading this, which I think also took me like 2 weeks to finish this little book. And there's pictures in here, okay? So it's not like, and the font isn't like that small. It looks small on the camera, but it's not that small. So I just think that's why it took me longer. But now looking back, this book is actually really funny. Like, it's cute. It's good. I mean, I did give it a 3.75 stars. It is a classic literature book. And then I think also like towards the end, like the middle half, it kind of got intense, and I was not expecting that. And then it's just a good book. It's a mischievous little boy, and you follow him, and there's a lot of like, it's just funny, like the way, you know, kids think or thought. I still think kids think somewhat the same, you know, we're humans, right? But yeah, it's a fun read. If you want to read classic literature, I do recommend this because it doesn't have a lot of old English in here, and you pick up on certain words fairly quickly. I did mention this in the reading vlog, but there are some words that we do not use today now as a society because they're really mean words that are used in here, but they're not necessarily used. It's not that often. Like, you would maybe, I think that I remember it's like 4 or 5 times that they used the word. But yeah, it is a piece of its time. So we have to keep that, I think, in mind when reading classic literature, and, you know, hold it to, I mean, if it's classic literature, it means it's kind of stood the test of time, right? But when it comes to like writing and how authors wrote, I think it is good to keep in mind that it was a different world back then. We have evolved, thankfully, in that way, and we don't use those words anymore because we know better, and we know that that's not kind, that's not loving, that's not respectful. But I am not gonna knock down points on it because, again, it was written way back when. So I think if you can't separate that, maybe skip on this book. I don't know. It's a good book. I liked it. I have a lot more thoughts on this in real time in that reading vlog, but yeah, 3.75 classic literature book. It's good. It was fun. It was really fun. And then the next book after that one it's actually one of the novellas I read. which is Redawn, and that's a novella. So this book holds 3 novellas. It's part of the Skyward series, and then so it actually has it on the back. So this is book 1, which is Skyward. This is book 2, Starsight. Yeah, Starsight. And then after this book, you read the first 2 novellas, which is Sunreach and Red Dawn. I had already read Sunreach last year, so I read Redawn this month. And then after you read Redawn, you read the 3rd book, which is Cytonic. And then after Cytonic, you read the last novella, which is Evershore. And then you read the 4th book, which is the final book in the series. It is a little bit complicated, but it's Brandon Sanderson. I think it's expected. But I did read Red Dawn. Skyward is a sci-fi, science fiction. And it is, I don't really want to get too into it because, again, this is already after the 2nd book and then after the 1st novella. But pretty much in these novellas, we're learning more about what's going on with like the supporting characters of the Skyward series, while the main character is doing other stuff. So like in the main books, you do see the interaction and you get to know like the supporting characters, but in these novellas, each novella is literally just the point of view and like certain things that are going on kind of either simultaneously or behind the scenes while the main characters are off doing like battling, for example. So you get a lot of like a lot more details in this one to support the main books. I hope that makes sense. But I really enjoyed these. I have, spoiler alert, I did finish Evershore, but that one's going to be in the April wrap up because I read it on April 2nd. So, but yeah, I already read all of them. They're great. For Red Dawn, we learn more about a different species in this world that we but that the main character worked with in the 2nd book. So we get to learn more about like their history and their world and their culture and all of that. So I really enjoyed it because then it gives more importance, I feel like, to that character in the series, you know? And then we get to learn more about the slugs. The slugs are the best. I mean, there's a lot of cool things about this series, but to me, the slugs are the best supporting character ever. Because yes, dragons are amazing and I love dragons too, but these slugs, they're slugs. Like, they're little, but they're mighty. So I personally love all the slugs. Every time slugs are involved with the characters, I have a smile on my face reading it because they are the best. And if you want to know why they're the best, you should probably read Skyward series because the slugs are great. So yeah, we in Red Dawn we learn more about the slugs and like their history and their powers, and it was cute. It was cute. I loved it. And then the final book I read, which, full transparency, I did finish reading on April 1st, but that was only because I had like 60 pages left and I didn't want to wait until April to talk about it because it only took me like an hour to read because I was also watching like a baseball game. So anyways, yeah, so I did finish it technically in April, but I'm counting it in March because there are no rules, right? I hope. But that book is Cytonic. I just went over the whole how to read the Skyward series. This is the 3rd book. This book, there was a day where I got to a part, again, I don't want to like spoil anything, and this is already the third book, so very kind of limited on what I can say. But what I will say is that I did not see any of this coming. In, you know, like in the whole series, Spencer, she's the main character. She talks about what it used to be, right? Like in the first human war, or this and that, and about this other world, and you know, all these things. Well, we finally got to see some of those things, and I did not see any of it coming. Like, when a new character is introduced in this book, the way that he arrives, I literally had to stop. Like, I reread it first because I was like, wait, did I just read that? And then I did. So I literally stopped. I closed the book and I did not read for the rest of the day because I was so shocked. I was like, how did we get here? Like, what? Like, it was, yeah, it was good. Don't let my somewhat annoyance fool you. It was good. But yeah, we had already kind of grown accustomed to, like Spence's world and their world and like the superiority and like, you know, we were kind of already used to getting more familiar, you know, with that world and what its advantages were and what its disadvantages were. And we already knew like somewhat most of the politics. We knew who the bad people were, and you know, all those things. And then this book comes along and you're thrown literally into a new world and you're just like, okay. So then you kind of have to relearn a lot of things in this book, but then eventually it all ends up making sense, and then it ties in with everything. Obviously, it's Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, this book shocked me. I think that's the best way to describe it. It shocked me. I personally loved it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the ending also got me. It didn't get me emotional because we learned that it's not... There was a shocking part at the ending, and it kind of did break my heart, but then it was mended a little bit. So I was like, okay, like, we're good. I think we're going to be good. And then I quickly ended up going into the last novella, which I already said, spoiler alert, I already read. It did take me like a day. Like, I read last night and then this morning. So I already finished it. So you guessed it. The next book I'm going to pick up is going to be the last book in the series and see how it ends. But I do highly recommend this series. It is a YA series, so I feel like the topics aren't as intense. I mean, it does get intense, but I don't know. I like it. If you're thinking of getting into Brandon Sanderson, like, and seeing kind of how he like does world building and character development, I would recommend this series. Granted, I've only read Elantris and Warbreaker and the first Mistborn book, so by Brandon Sanderson, and then this series. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I personally enjoyed it. It's a fun, easy read, but I like it. I highly recommend it. So yeah, those were the books that I read in the month of March. And now we get to talk about my updates, like my goal update for the first quarter. Goal number 1 was to read 12 books in the year. So Sorry, my camera cut off. But to summarize my goals for 2024, if you haven't seen the video, so for the first goal, I did this last year and I want to do it again this year. But the way I treat like the Goodreads reading goal, like numerical goal, is the number I set is the number of, I look at it as like a minimum requirement. So for example, so this year and last year I put 12 books. That doesn't mean I'm only going to read 12 books in the year. It just means if everything went bad and I was super busy and this and that, like life just kept happening, which it kind of has, honestly, and it's kind of, I'm not even gonna go there, but I want to read 12 books still, you know, in the year. So it's not, yeah, I think it's just because, I mean, that just works better for me. Because if I set 100, I'm going to be stressing out until I read those 100, and setting the bar at 12, which is like the minimum requirement, it just makes every book after the 12 so much more, I don't know, it just feels liberating. And I have seen videos on YouTube and people talk about like the Goodreads, you know, how it stresses them out and all these things. And the way that I treat it is more of, well, that's the minimum, you know, we'll just, you know, leave it at that. But with the books I read in March, without counting the novella I finished this morning, I have now read 10 books. 10 books so far. So I'm about to hit, technically with the last Skyward book, it's going to be the 12th book. So that one's pretty close to being checked off. But for the purpose of keeping it honest, and, you know, it's still not checked off because I'm at book 10 as of March, the end of March. If you see me looking, it's because I have some notes on the side. But yeah, there's nothing more to that goal. That is my minimum, and I'm about to meet the minimum. So I am excited because that means everything else I read after that is just not tied to anything, and I love that. I think I also find it liberating because I am a mood reader and I don't have to worry about numbers and things like that, because there are some, you know, days or like weeks where I won't read anything because honestly I'm just not in the mood. Either I'm feeling tired or we just have a lot of, you know, life happening, like errands, appointments, Bible study, like hanging out with our friends and going out to dinners and things like that. You know, life. So being a mood reader, I think, is great, but then it also comes with its downfalls. But anyways, I'll make a separate video for that. But yeah, 10 books. Goal number 1. Goal number 2 is read more classics. I want to read more classic literature this year. I used to read it a lot when I was younger, and then I kind of stopped, and I haven't really read much since. So I want to start reading, you know, classics again because I personally do enjoy them. I think also part of being, you know, immigrant parents, classic literature, especially American, or, you know, yeah, mainly American or English. I find it fascinating because it's a different world, and I personally enjoy reading it. So for this goal, I didn't have a set number. So I don't really have, or not that I remember. I probably should have watched the video, but I don't think I have a number. And if I do, it might be 5, but I might be confusing that for goal number 3. But anyways, this quarter I did read one, which was the Huckleberry one. So next quarter, for this falling quarter, I kind of do want to read a little bit more classics. But again, I'm a mood reader. Like, what can you do? But my intention is to read a little bit more classics, a few more classics. So we'll see how I do. But at least for this quarter, I read one. So that was great. I could check quarter one. And then goal number 3 was read more Spanish books, or read Spanish books. My first language is Spanish. Primero aprendí a hablar en español y después aprendí inglés en la escuela. Y ahorita parece como que no sé hablar español, pero es porque tengo nervios, y cuando tengo nervios no puedo hablar. But yeah, so I do speak Spanish. I know how to read it, but I don't really practice reading it. So I think I need to, yeah. So for this goal, I did not meet at all quarter one, but I did do some research, and I did find some YouTube accounts that are, their content is in Spanish and they read books in Spanish. So I started following people. I do have a list of a few books I want to read. Those books, though, are kind of hard to come by in the US. So I either have to buy them on Kindle or, I don't know, figure it out. But I have been doing research, and there are a few books that I do want to read. But yeah, I did not read any book in Spanish this first quarter of the year. Yeah, so those are my updates. I need to read a book in Spanish next quarter for sure. No, but in all seriousness though, I do have right now from the library, I did get a book in Spanish, and it's on the Kindle. So I'm probably going to be reading that. I know I've said that I don't like to read 2 books like kind of at the same time, but I think for this one I will, because I know reading in Spanish, for me, it's a lot slower. So I don't want to go into a reading slump because I can't finish like a book fairly quickly. So I think I'm going to read the last Skyward series book, and then read that book in Spanish as well. But another thing, and I've known this for a while, but I just kind of want to say it on here, but it's also kind of hard to read books in Spanish, because when books are either translated or there's like a lot of authors, or there's authors that specifically only write in Spanish, it's like Spanish from Spain. It's not Mexican Spanish. And Mexican Spanish and Spain Spanish are completely different. Well, not completely, but there's a lot of things that are different. And then there's certain words over in Spain Spanish that mean bad things in Mexico Spanish. So sometimes reading a book in Spanish, I keep laughing because of the meaning that it means in Mexico, but I know that it's not that. That's not the meaning that they're trying to say, but it is just funny when you read it. So yeah, it's not a rant, it's just more of an observation. So people who don't know Spanish are, I guess, aware of that although it is in Spanish, it's technically not the same Spanish. So yeah, so I'll leave you guys with that little random note, but I hope you guys are having an amazing first quarter. You guys had an amazing first quarter of the year, because we just started the second quarter. And I hope this year is treating you well. And if it hasn't, I hope and pray that it does change and, the tide starts turning. So let me know what you guys read in the month of March. And if you guys highly recommend something, let me know, because I'm always open to read a book people love. And then also, if you have reading goals, how did you guys do for quarter one? The good thing is that if it didn't go so well, like my Spanish reading goal, we have another chance at it this upcoming goal, or this upcoming quarter. So yeah, I hope you guys have an amazing week, day, month, year. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.